how tonight is. Tonight's session is a little different. It's kind of organic. And we're going to go through a few slides. Allison's going to take us through a few slides. After probably the opening session, we're going to break out into some birds of feather sessions. So I'm going to nominate a topic that I want to talk about, and I'm going to go pick a room. And if you want to talk about my topic, then you get to follow me, and that's where y'all get to participate. If you have a topic that you want to talk about, or a particular, even if you're not the expert in it, but it's something you want to talk about, then you'll come on up, you'll tell everybody this is what I want to talk about, you go to room, and your flock will flock with you. Okay? Everybody that's an improving employee that's in this room, I expect you guys to participate. Okay? But so we'll be a little cramped right at the first part, but then we're going to kind of break out and stuff. Cool? Yeah? Now, if you were expecting to see somebody famous, sorry. I mean, anybody famous this time. This was one of the topics that was nominated by the crew. Who dominated this one? Yeah, so it's his fault. So,
and he's getting proof of it, of what happened.
Now, do you realize that you're a larger draw than Martin Fowler?
Apparently
Okay,
so,
just saying. Okay, you get that on tape, Martin? Okay. All right. Yeah, you have to speak with an English accent. So. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Allison now. Let her go through our slides after I turn off Constant Sorrow. Okay, I can do a Mac. I think.
Better than I can.
There you go. All right, take it away, girlfriend.
All right. Who are we? We're a user group. We were founded back in January of 2009, so it's been a couple of years. The leadership, Lance Dacey of Active Network, which was formerly Fellowship Technology. He could not make it tonight. He's traveling again. Gary McCants, who just stepped out of the room with Improving Enterprises, and myself, Allison Pollard, also with Improving. Our mission is not only to talk about Scrum and the framework, because we think it's really cool, but really to help you guys do better doing better today than you were yesterday. Some ways to reach us: we have the website dfwscrum.com. We have a blog that we don't use very often. It's mostly Lance. Feel free to ping us and give us things you want us to blog about, because Gary and I never really think to do that. We're just out in the field and making things happen. You can reach us on Twitter at dfwscrum. We also have Lance, Gary's, and my own names up there as well. For those that haven't really been here for a while, every quarter we try to get one of the big name speakers. I think it was one of the big brain people that signed the Agile Manifesto quite often. So we had Ken Schwaber back in January, we had Ward Cunningham in April. We're trying to get Michael Feathers, Martin Fowler, Jeff Patton, Tom DeMarco. I think we've tried to get Brian Merrick. If there are other people you'd like to see, let us know and we'll see what we can make happen. Tonight's sponsors, of course, Improving Enterprises, provided the food and the location tonight. And food is outside, along with drinks. Feel free to have some beer as well in the keg. Bathrooms are just out the doorways to the right, behind the elevator. And of course, Fellowship Technologies also helps pretty frequently with food and location. If you're looking for a job, Improving is always hiring. Active Network has a couple open positions. And then Mark Huber, back here in the corner, if you want to talk about some positions you know of.
Yeah, just real quick. I'm from a software company called Clickmotive. We're in the automotive industry. And we're there's about 8 of us here from our team. Thanks, guys, for everything. It's always a real fun group. We've been coming for months. We have a lot of openings, and we are looking for talent from these user groups, because we're looking for some really passionate people. We've got a lot of people here. We're here trying to improve ourselves. We're looking for the same type of people, because a lot of what we've been finding is people that are just day-to-day work, but we've got people who are really into what they are doing, very passionate about it. We have 4 development positions open, QA, and network infrastructure operations. I'll be here after the meeting. I've got some business cards if you guys want to chat, hear a little bit more about it. Hit any of us up here in this section. Our QA manager here, Mike Kurtz, and the development's also here. So thanks a lot, guys.
Okay, so guys, from an improving standpoint, we are still looking for coaches all the time. We've got a tech lead level, kind of senior.net placement that we're looking for, senior.net consultant, and we're looking for a senior Java type as well. So you can find this this little thing out on the middle by the pizza. Okay. If you spill pizza on it, you have to take it home.
Gary, did you want to talk more about the birds of a feather and how to split up? Or
Yeah, that's my Mustang.
your car?
I thought you were going to say birds and the bees. Okay, is Brian from Fellowship here yet? Brian coming? Okay, so Lance lied. Lance said that some of his guys are going to come and talk to us. So, where'd my, oh.
I don't know what you did.
Oh, I hit it. Listen, I've got great PPT food. Here we go. So if you unhide the slide, it will appear. Ta-da! Thank you for coming. Okay, so this is kind of how I wanted to organize tonight. I want to talk a little bit about the connection of this topic to Scrum. And then the fellowship folks were supposed to come by and tell us a little bit about how they've been doing this. Is Derek here yet? If Derek's not here, then Richard, you get to talk. So we've got an example of doing some test automation at Thomson Reuters. You're going to talk. And then I'd like to hear a few war stories from the folks in the room. And then I'm hoping that the pizza and beer doesn't kick in too much so that y'all actually get some juices going and we'll get some bird of feather sessions going. Again, the way bird of feather is going to work is you're going to come stand right here and you're going to say, this is the topic I'd like to talk about. And explain it a little bit. And if you'd like to go with me, follow me out that door. So if you're going to take a group with you, find out how many people are going to kind of follow you, you know, and if no one follows you, just go home. But if some folks follow you, then you can pick anywhere in the improving space except for the whiskey lounge, which is what I'm taking. But other than that, just find your place and you guys go and chat. What I'd love to have happen is somewhere around maybe 7:45 or so, you and your group come back and report back to folks what y'all talked about. Clear? Yeah? Okay. So this is a users group. So be users. Okay. I know Lance likes to entertain y'all. I don't care about your entertainment. Okay. Let's actually be a part of a community here, and let's be organic about stuff. Okay. So that's how I want the birds of feather sessions to work. Anybody want to argue about it? No? Everybody good? Okay. So Fellowship Tech, everybody clap for them because they are sponsors. Okay, all right. Everybody boo them because they're not here. Boo! Where were you guys? Okay. All right, so Richard, just help me out. I'll do some of the talking. Okay? Stand up for us. Come on, Richard. Richard is one of the most senior tech guys, senior QA guys that I know. Let's see. You know Ed from what days? How far y'all go back?
Early 1990s.
Yeah, so Ed Brandon, one of our guys here, but Richard was introduced to me as Test. You've been doing Test forever, right? You're really old and yeah. So come on, man. Or no, he's comfortable, I think. Yeah. So out at Thomson Reuters, we're doing some work from Thomson Reuters, and I don't know if we can give any secrets away or anything, but. You want to describe a little bit, just kind of some of the automation stuff that's going on out there?
Yeah, we started out there by using Cucumber, and trying to get our BAs to actually write the tests, and that just didn't work very well. And so I'm not sure if we were doing something wrong or if that just, you know, it doesn't always work. Anyway, so then we switched over, and we really got our development group more involved in the testing, and we started writing them actually as C# tests, and then using Selenium actually to drive our software. And that has turned out to work a lot better. The developers are really very serious about doing the, you know, making sure there's tests that cover what they've developed. And so that's kind of the way we're proceeding right now.
So
see, I'm not much of a talker.
we're all family.
Stuff to say.
So let's describe a little bit of what Ian was doing with his tools.
Okay, well, Ian was actually writing test harnesses that we were using for the development of the tests, and trying to think. Let's see.
Yeah, so what I recall is that, and this is the birds of feather topic I want to talk a little bit about. So they were using the given, when, then format for acceptance criteria. Everybody get that one? Okay. As a grammar input to a tool that Ian was writing that would in turn read a file given in that format and translate that in the spec flow test, right?
Yes, actually we didn't really use that.
That's what he was working on.
That was available, and that was something that we were looking at, but that again was when we were thinking that the BAs would actually be able to produce the test cases, you know, and unfortunately that just didn't work out very well.
Okay, so that's been some of our experience at Thompson. Question?
Why did you believe the VA is going to be able to write this? Was the choice of Cucumbers supposed to be on that level of scripting and sort of?
That's right, it is. Yeah, yes, it's designed to allow non-technical people to write what they feel the system should be doing, and then you'd have that interpreted with a test harness to actually drive the code. Yes.
So, was the failure on that more due to their inability to translate what they wanted to do to the specific format necessary, or were they struggling to really even flesh out how to test? What does it mean to test this feature?
I think it's more of the second. We just had a lot of difficulty getting the BAs to really be able to describe what they wanted the requirements to do, and either it was way too much detail or not nearly enough detail, and we ended up going back around and around and around, you know, over the same thing multiple times. I think, you know, if we put more effort into it, we may have gotten it to work. But we were kind of on a time crunch and kind of just pushed that aside.
Is
Yeah.
Cucumber the same as EasyB? Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not. Does somebody else know?
We got a cucumber expert in the house?
EasyB?
EasyB?
Or EasyB?
I haven't heard of EasyB.
Hey, Carrie. Yeah, I don't know what that is either.
You write it in given, when, then format
Okay.
in English.
Mm-hmm. Then it does sound the
I
same.
think it's the same, I mean, it's the same concept. I haven't worked in either one of these.
Thanks, Richard.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, who's next? Oh, okay.
I'm trying to figure out, so you've got the PAs writing the test, it's supposed to work. And you've got the developer sitting where? Are they sitting right next to the BA? Or how do they know what to design?
Well, we had one BA on each team, on each Scrum team.
Okay.
But we also had a group of BAs that worked separately.
So let's say
from
it worked the way it
developers.
was designed. So you've got the BA there and he's designing tests in Cucumber. Now you've got the developer sitting in the room. What is he writing? How does he know, is he running that test right now as he's designing his code?
He's using the test as his requirements to design his code. And then he also writes the harness to actually take the test and actually drive his code.
So he's designing the test first, is that what you're saying? And then writing his code?
Ideally, yes, but
Y'all hear the
in
question?
reality, it's probably both happening at the same time.
Y'all hear the question over there?
I didn't hear it.
Yeah, so you asked, were they writing the tests first? Charlie was asking, okay, so what is the coder actually coding? And she was asking, are they writing the tests first? And so the answer was, what was your answer?
Ideally.
Ideally.
But in reality, it happens more concurrently.
And that I word is the best word for an agile coach. And you use that a lot, ideally. And then you follow it up with, what they're really doing. But ideally. Okay. All right, please.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. It's my first night in the room.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I'm a BA.
Ready.
But I'm technical. I also used to be a programmer. And I have concerns about a developer developing tests because they build the test to what they coded. Whereas a BA should be building a test to what was promised to the user.
Okay, so she's new, so y'all don't pile on too much, but.
So I'm not shy. Go for it, guys.
Hence the reason the BA writes the given when then, and the developer makes that happen in code. So they're not really writing the test, they're implementing the test.
So there is a connection to y'all, and I'm going to state the obvious. So there's a connection to the whole concept of test-driven development or test first and automation. Okay, now they are usually talked about hand in hand. They're not necessarily going hand in hand. Okay, but some of what you're talking about is just the good test first kind of approach, whether you buy into that or not. Okay, so and that's certainly something that we could do in a breakout session if someone wants to take the topic of, okay, what's TDD really like in the real world now and that sort of thing. I think it'd be a great breakout topic. Okay? All right, so I need some more war stories. Jim. But if you're doing some of this stuff at your place or you've got an opinion about it, now's your time. Don't be scared. Please.
My exposure to the automated testing was we had a library we would add to the code base, and then we would write much simpler code that was essentially read by that library and then goes and fills in all the slots to make it do what you thought you wanted. But it was still complex enough that you had to have the developer who was familiar with what does the code need to be set up and what we're going to see on the other side of it.
So that's what y'all had, that's the experience you had back at your place?
Right, and it was also not automated in the sense of we've got 10 or 15 tests here that we've made for some feature point on the system. You went and, well, once you've added the library to the code base, you're set there, but you went through each of those tests separately, and I was kind of thinking maybe you guys were going to talk about a system that was even better, that was going to have my folder full of tests, and boom, I could go through all of them at once.
Anybody want to comment on that? Berniak?
Oh, I can say I'm currently looking at the Water. It's a web application testing in Ruby, simply because it's the closest to PHP. I know Selenium is very popular, but when I saw Selenium, a lot of people are writing in IDEs, and when a developer changes, just the design, all those tests break.
Can y'all hear? You may have to stand up and enunciate. Use your outside voice.
So my company is currently trying to get into test-driven development, or not test-driven, but sorry, more automated testing. Right now, we've got some people that do Selenium IDE, point and click, and that works until we change the design of the page, and then essentially everything breaks. The two big testing tools I found, and our application is all web-driven as well. Looking at Water, which is web application testing in Ruby, and Selenium, or Selenium 2, I think. Not the IDE. That's one of the things that I was confused about in the beginning. There's a big difference between point and click and record and actually programming it so that way if you do change the design, you can go to the lowest level of include and say, okay, this is the new HTML tag you're looking for. I'm looking at Ruby simply because it's closest to PHP, and that's what all our development's done in. My findings with Selenium is that it seems to support Java, and that it kind of supports other languages, and when I find anything that kind of supports other languages, that means that it quickly changes and half the stuff that you wrote doesn't work anymore. Hopefully I'm wrong on that, but that's one of the things I like about Water. It seems to be, it's Ruby, it does this, it does it well.
Just a quick question. You said you're looking at a Ruby stack for your test, but you said you're on a PHP stack for your main
Right.
application?
Selenium keeps looking for a volunteer to write the plugin to PHP for that. Another thing we're finding, on a side note, Chef automated server rollouts is also heavily Ruby dependent.
Right.
And Ruby's kind of the cool kid on the block right now, so I figure, this is a good opportunity to learn enough. The code that, in my half a day of playing is pretty easy for just, I need to go to this HTML element, set some values and submit a page, and then make sure the next page has that value on it. I don't know anything about, desktop application testing.
So your issue with Selenium is that you can't, when the objects change, you can't get it to return the objects on the page?
Well, one of the challenges that we face is it's non-technical people writing the IDE, so it's clicking through and it writes it out in HTML. So,
Okay, so you're using the Selenium IDE.
correct, and not
Yeah.
Selenium
The,
Grid or whatever.
the recommendation.
Not IDE, yes.
Right, the recommendation I would use, the way to get around that would be to use Eclipse or Visual Studio and actually architect your test automation project a little bit so that you create a layer for all your hooks into the GUI, and then you create a layer which contains all of your features or stories or whatnot that you're going to test. And then you create another layer which would be a driver which would actually drive those tests. That way when you change something on the page, you only have to fix that little query in one spot. And a lot of times you can also do things like regular expressions, and you can do pattern matching, and when you get into that, that'll totally resolve your issues with your object recognition.
Yeah, there was a podcast on water.com with one of the guys that's the head tester at Convio.
And Water's just as good as Selenium.
Yeah, what I read was it's like you typically have the drivers, then Selenium, and then Water's supposed to be on top of Selenium. I don't know how much of that's true, but everything the author of both Selenium and Water that was on both those teams said he left Selenium because there was too much focus on the IDE.
So I think we need to make Jim do a breakout session on Selenium. What do y'all think?
Yeah.
Any more war stories? Any more folks doing it at your place? We'd like to hear from y'all. Please.
I've been involved using Selenium in Groovy files. It sounds like what you're describing, more broken out. Instead of using the Selenium IDE, running it in Eclipse.
Running it through C# or Eclipse. Running it from Visual Studio.
Yeah, that seemed to work well. When we were running it from the HTML files, it was horrible. Running it from Eclipse, it seemed to be very stable. It was good.
I don't have a war story other than I've dealt with it before. I've used Watson quite a bit, and Watson is far superior to Selenium with respect to single-page apps, dynamic apps. I don't know if Water does it, but Watson actually caches the DOM on a periodic basis as you access different elements on the page. Selenium does not. Selenium caches the initial DOM context. So if the page is moving or redrawn the DOM, you get DOM elements not found. And it's a crucial inability for Selenium to deal with dynamic pages that I hope gets fixed in the future.
That sounds like another good breakout session myself, but
Jeb can just talk tools, period.
please.
So, I'm just a simple development manager, but I'm here with our QA strategist, and something I've noticed is I think there's a lot of focus on automated testing, and I think automated testing is a valuable tool, but I would like to see at other people's strategies when it comes to actual manual testing. Like our philosophy is the best testing tool we have in-house is your brain. I mean, you're physically exercising the application is the best testing and the most testing we can get from our delivery team, and kind of the responsibility of the entire delivery team being responsible for the quality of the application, not just making sure that all the automated tests pass. So I'm kind of curious with other people in here, kind of what are your strategies to complement the automated testing with a more manual testing strategy?
I like it.
Hey, Tim.
It's working right here. So, basically, one of those things that you have to worry about with automation versus manual testing, people look at it as the versus too much. You got to be complementary, because the thing is, especially in the agile Scrum type world where you're having iterations over iterations, you're building upon, you're rarely removing features. So your regression library just keeps growing with every release. So basically, you're having more and more stuff to cover over the same period of time. So you have your choice of either ramping up more manual testers or B, increase your automation coverage. If you do it complementary, you can accomplish both to a certain extent, because otherwise you're inheriting more risk when you got to hire more people, which of course management's not usually in favor of doing. So it can be a dual-pronged strategy as long as you put the appropriate effort to building a framework like Jeff mentioned that you can extend upon easily versus just hiring more and more manual testers or incurring more risk with testing less over a period of time.
Yeah, I've heard that it's, you test what you can test, it's easy, and then that gives the QA more time to go and try and break things.
But you don't want to get rid of manual. You definitely don't want to. Just you want to make it where you beat your head versus the repetitive task that can be done easily over and over again by automation script. Focus on that part for doing automation parts.
We talked about it not being versus as well. Something that I've done in the past too is what I call tool system testing.
Can y'all hear? Can y'all hear? Okay, y'all may have to stand up or enunciate so that folks can hear.
Well, I'm just expanding on his idea of it's not a dichotomy necessarily. It's something I've done a lot in the past is what I call tool assisted testing, where the automation is not a complete test in and of itself, but it simplifies the manual testing capacity, so it can go in and create a bunch of users or load a database or push a bunch of orders through a system or any sort of deals like that to make the manual testing more efficient and easier to run.
And I'd extend on that. I used to work at Match.com, working on chemistry.com product, which anybody familiar with is called like eHarmony. It takes 30 to 40 minutes to complete a profile and answer all the questions. I don't want myself and my team wasting their effort creating profiles for particular types of tests, for different types of matching algorithms. So we wrote an automation script in Selenium and used it to basically go through all the match combinations using data-driven testing, just to get the profile to the point that we wanted to use it for our other manual tests.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I just kind of follow up on that. Definitely, I think manual testing and automation testing are attempting to solve different problems when it comes to the QA world. I use the analogy with our team of a minefield. Your automated testing or your scripted testing is like walking through a path that's already been cleared to that minefield. That's going to help you make sure that path stays clear as you move forward and build more around it. But it doesn't serve a lot of the purpose of actually uncovering new hidden defects in your minefield. And so we use our manual testing as a way to really explore vectors through the minefield to uncover those hidden bugs that the automation is never going to uncover. Because automation is walking the path that has been walked over and over and over again. So it definitely has to be complementary. And the tool assisted is also another way that they work together. So it's definitely can't be an adversarial relationship between the two approaches, but they're solving different problems.
Isn't this similar to actually testing games? You get a whole bunch of kids playing games and break this shit.
Yes, but with some controls and some ways to capture metrics out of it so you can actually see what your test coverage is and how well you've actually covered your application.
Right, I mean, did you plan that before they go into the game?
Yes.
What was the question that he responded with? Wasn't it a lot like testing games where you get a bunch of
games? You have kids come in who play games and that's all they do, and they just go in and they find out the bugs in your games and report it back to you. So it supports manual testing more than it does automated.
Okay, so please.
The one inherent pitfall of that, though, is that we, luckily, what I help support and drive is a enterprise social platform that we deploy early versions of within our company. And so we have, anywhere between 30 to 70,000 people banging on it and reporting problems. It's good that they can find the problems, but they have to be able to articulate steps to repeat. So that's the key part of it, right? It's knowing who you're allowing into the pool to come in and test, and making sure that they understand the guidelines of what you're going to need to replicate it. Saying, I went and created a post and clicked save and it didn't work. Well, odds are there's probably a few more steps that were involved along the way that caused you to get to this particular case.
Yeah, you can't manage
sure
that.
That's an agreement that the folks that are manual testing want to sign up for.
Yeah, you have to manage the size of the pool that you're dealing with, and you do have to provide guidelines on how you capture that and how you report those things. The problem we have is, we're reporting things that we discovered this last time around. It's our first time to really use this process, and we're discovering things that have been in production for who knows how long. And so now it's an issue of prioritizing those and categorizing them, in terms of how we remediate those going forward.
Okay, so a couple more things. Who uses QTP? Any comments about QTP? Curie?
Our goal is
I don't like it.
automate basically the regression and manual test the current. That's basically the short and skinny. It's not realistic, right? But that's what our goal is.
What's your experience with it?
Our experience has been great. We've been using it for 10 plus years. And recently, within about the last 3 years, what we've done is we've created an automated framework that really hides the QTP engine from the end users. So from an end user standpoint, non-technical people can write test automation, and we have a core group of automated testers that maintain the engine. So there's magic that happens behind the scenes to make it the object recognition and the engine work with the framework and with the navigation. But if you have an engine that understands your application and you can tie the hooks together, then the framework on top of it is just you don't have a lot of maintenance associated with it. So our core group of automation testers really support different product groups by tweaking the engine to support different features that the different testers need.
Cool. I think there was another QTP hand.
Oh, no, not QTP. I had.
Oh, well, go ahead.
So you hit on something that I'm kind of struggling with right now. Is you were talking about being able to show test coverage and that kind of stuff. I guess like for a functional piece from if you're using like JUnit or something like that, it's pretty easy. But I'm trying to figure out how to show that from a business-facing QA testing. I was wondering how.
If you look at James Bach's website, he has something called session-based testing. And it's a pretty good outline of an approach that you can use to track some basic metrics. You're not going to get the level of detail that you can get with an automated tool, but you can get enough.
And I'm looking at we're using fitness to do majority of our automated testing.
Yeah, we probably ought to talk about fitness. All right, so gang, it's about 10 after, so I'm anxious to kind of get us into groups, and some folks have been standing up for a while, and I want to let them sit down. So I passed a question that I want to kind of give to you guys, because this is a DFW Scrum users group. What's the relationship of this topic in Scrum? Please?
I'll just say again that for us in the company specifically, driving home the point that the focus of delivering quality software is the entire Scrum team's responsibility. We even said it's the entire company's responsibility to deliver a quality product. It's not just the QA guy is the gatekeeper for the quality. That's just not the case. And we find with Scrum, especially with the idea of a cross-functional team, that just drives home the point that it's the entire team's responsibility to take on that role.
Okay, I'll buy that. I think it's a good sentiment. But what's the relationship of this specific topic to Scrum?
At our company, I think we looked at it as a way of eliminating waste. People alluded to it earlier, where if you have your manual testers just doing the same thing over and over again, to me that's waste. And so we added a regression suite piece that hits every tab, happy path, that they don't have to do that anymore.
Okay. Mike?
So it's a feedback loop. So the more automated tests that we have that can run really, really fast, we can get feedback back to our developers much sooner before they add more stuff on top of that wrong stuff. And so it's a lot about feedback loop.
Okay.
It's a great way to demonstrate working software.
Okay.
If the story is tested.
Okay.
Well, to the point that was made earlier about automation for regression, that's what we do, and we bake it into our build process. A build doesn't pass unless it passes all the automation.
Please.
Scrum involves a test. You code to the test. So if your software doesn't solve that problem,
Okay.
then it failed.
Okay. Please.
Help to make your definition of done.
Okay. Okay. I'll buy that, please.
Given the size of the Scrum team, at one point our regression tests will blow up so much that we must switch to automated testing.
Okay.
Manual is in
Okay.
favor.
Two more. Red.
I'm going to take a contrarian position that this topic actually has nothing to do with Scrum. Scrum is a management framework, and
I love you.
This is an engineering practice that is applicable in XP, in Kanban, in anything else. It helps you get the job done, but Scrum is a framework for managing projects.
That's exactly the answer I was looking for. What were you going to say?
In terms of Agile, it's, to all the points, it's continuous improvement. Improvement of the test, which leads to improvement of the code.
Yeah, Scrum's silent on this, y'all. Scrum is as silent on this practice as it is in any software development practice. Now, what that means is if you're going to use Scrum as a framework to build value and deliver stuff, it's y'all that have to own this. You can't look to the method. You can't even look necessarily to the manifesto, even though there are very congruent things like cross-functional teams and deliver working software as primary measure of progress and all that other hoopla. Okay? But Scrum does not give you a recipe book for this. It's an incumbent upon you guys to figure this out. Okay? So the relationship to Scrum is it enables you guys to be awesome, but it doesn't give you any other tools other than that. Fair enough? Okay, so I heard a couple of topics that I would love to see some folks doing, but I'll go ahead and announce mine. I'm going to talk about acceptance criteria, specifically the three types of the flavors of acceptance criteria. And I want to hone in on the given, when, then part as how does a good requirements process feed into this stuff. And that's what I'm going to talk about. So that'll be my session. And I'm going to exit stage left in just a second. And if you want to talk about that, then follow me. I'd love to hear somebody take manual testing strategies. I heard some questions around that. If you have any passion or interest in that, I'd love to see somebody volunteer for that one. I'd love to see somebody talk about a hybrid or tool-assisted kind of approach. That seemed to be kind of interesting to folks. Okay, so if you've got some passion around that, come on up and get you a group. Manual first versus automated first. Okay, I heard some folks kind of noodling on that. Do we write a bunch of manual tests first and then come back and automate them? Or do we come out right out of the gate and automate? I think that's a good topic perhaps. And then there's some tool-specific stuff. So I'd love to hear Jeb talk more about Selenium. I'd love to hear some folks talk about QTP strategies. So if you've got a particular tool that you either are using or you're looking at, and you'd like to have some discussion around that, I think that would be a good breakout topic. Okay? So I'm fixing to leave the room, and it's up to you guys. Okay? So if you want to talk about given, when, then kind of stuff, then come with me. Be back at 7:45?
Yes, you have
7:45 back in here for rally, okay?
Guess I got tools.
All right, so which classroom you want to grab? The one next door? Are you just doing tools in general or Selenium?
Tools in general, but the most widely used tool in the group is, how many people have used Selenium?
Or IDE or WebDriver?
Either
It's a fairly
one.
big difference. Well, yeah.
Yeah, ours is WebDriver.
Yeah.
Okay, so Selenium, hands. Okay, how many people use some other tool?
So we kind of have a multi-tier project. So we're using fitness to drive some of the kind of back end behind the covers testing.
So you guys have like test fixtures that integrate
Right.
with your code base.
Right. And then we have a web application part where we're starting to build out Selenium to test for the GUI for that. And then we have a mobile component where we're trying to get Robotium working to test Android application.
Okay.
So we kind of have multiple things going on.
What was it you said for testing web applications?
Selenium.
Okay, most of my experiences with Selenium have been like accessing it through a development environment. So that's basically what I use as the API.
Okay, so you're talking about the WebDriver level of it?
Right.
Yeah.
Not the point and click record.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, WebDriver just came out 2 years ago too, so Selenium 1 was still using
Right.
Selenium RC.
That was a fairly major change. There was no API to program Selenium WebDriver or Selenium at all.
Yes.
It was point and click record. Your script would be recorded in HTML in the IDE, and you could mess with it if you wanted to.
You could directly do it within
Yeah.
the Visual Studio Eclipse or
But
something like
it
that.
is designed to be a point and click record tool.
Exactly.
Which was worthless.
We started on IDE, and I mean, it was certainly better than nothing.
Yeah.
Right? That's certainly a fair assessment, sure. But once we got into WebDriver, we were able to scale number of tests dramatically.
Besides the fact that we need to test with multiple browsers and
Yeah.
with the IDE, you're only in Firefox. So.
That's generally the problem with all recording and playback
Yeah.
systems.
Anybody using water now?
I did our spike in Watton. Watton's just the .NET core of Water. It's a religious war. There's no, I prefer WebDriver. There's nothing inherently wrong with Watton or Water.
Yeah,
as
we're
far as I
using
can tell.
Wattage, which is web application testing in Java.
Yeah.
Which is something similar port type deal.
I can't remember the name of it. We used something that was also built on top of Selenium. And the problem that we ran into is apparently it was open source, but it wasn't never widely adopted, and it was not being continually updated. So that was my concern about water.
Watton's kind of running into the same problem,
Is it?
Yes.
where it's kind of
Gone stale.
It's gone stale. It's kind of grinding down to the halt. They only support IE now, so I'm thinking that one's about done.
WebDriver more or less has a lot of Google backing, Mozilla backing. There's a lot of momentum behind them. They have their best support is in Firefox, probably second best Chrome browser. There's an IE browser, and you can kind of cross your fingers on what day of week it is. I had the same concern with Watton when I looked at it. It's like it was years since they've had an update.
They were trying to implement all the multiple browser support in it, but it just they could never get it together.
So you said y'all were using Selenium for your testing different browsers and whatnot, and you're saying that it was kind of iffy on the IE.
Yes.
So
Yeah, so you put it's basically, they have a plug-in framework. You don't code against any one specific browser, and they're swapping out their implementation underneath. The supported one is Firefox. I think Google backs the Chrome one. And the IE one is one of those, just doesn't get a lot of updates, it's got a lot of bugs. So that's what we've seen.
So it's just a lot more buggy.
What we get is more fragile tests with it. Sporadic failures, false positives, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause that's one of the reasons why we're moving to Selenium, so we have to be able to support multiple browsers.
I'd be
Is there a
interested.
plugin for Safari for it, or do you know?
I have not seen one. Pitts would know.
Water has one. I know that. Water originally started out focused on IE, and then I think everything's going to the web drivers. The browsers have been the problem for a lot of this. Now that they're finally starting to care about this for web developers, I'm seeing a lot more of it. So I think Water is kind of on top of the web driver, just like Selenium is. But I could be wrong in that understanding.
I'd be interested to know, WebDriver is a programming API level interface. Who's using some sort of SpecFlow, Cucumber, some sort of DSL on top of WebDriver for the plain English given Lambda and formats? I mean, I know we're doing that.
That was the Easy B that I've used.
We haven't done this yet, but, I said we were using Fitness to kind of drive
Right.
some of the back-end testing. I'm hoping to be able to take that and kind of integrate it with the Selenium, so, in that ideal world, we can have business doing more, writing the test cases in the Fitness group.
We have our spec that we're using on top of Wattage, which actually has some JRuby for putting our scripting, so we write the scripting in Ruby, more English language, right? Like, doesn't create a DSL on top of it, just to make it more readable, but that's the base architecture that we're using for ours. But we can also swap
What
out.
are y'all using?
Our spec is part of the Ruby library, but it's just the framework. The one thing we built, and I can't say I personally built it, my operations have built it, or our automation team built it, is we have basically Java at the bottom, because that's what Wattage is based off of, Wattage on top of that. Then JRuby is actually part of Ruby, or Java, I should say, add-on. And then basically our specs on top of that, and on top of that is our own DSL, where we have the particular Finder level type stuff that, identifies the individual pieces and components of the login process. Then we write the scripts against that DSL, so we can change out anything underneath theoretically without breaking much. So we're actually switching, because the idea is we have where it's doing the base testing in IE, and then with getting Chrome, which Wattage does not support very well, we have to go through Selenium. So we have actually a different architecture running underneath for just that, but it's all on top of the same test cases executing against each of them.
So to kind of figure, test your different browsers, you have kind of two different frameworks.
Yeah, we have the services layer architecture that we're using, actually SOAP UI calls underneath that to do that piece. But that is not something that was created overnight.
It sounds like you have a lot of development time invested in that. Was it hard to swing the dev time to get the investment in that?
Not for me, because it wasn't under my. But yeah, that was a heavy investment from the beginning, and having everything automatable and more maintainable over periods of time. Now, there's always catches and things like, we wish we would have done this, 2 years ago when we started it, but it's like anything, it's evolutionary. And that's the thing, a lot of people jump into automation. It's like, I'm going to solve this big, huge problem, and boom, and they customize it to solve that one problem. Oh, wait, they changed it. No, we got to re-architect everything. So I think part of it is what Jeb was talking about, and I think to me too, is the framework level of trying to keep it so that you can get away from the code to a certain extent for your test cases.
One of the things I'm hearing is you're writing a lot of code to test some code. How do you know that you haven't surfaced a bug within your testing framework versus one that's in the application?
Very good question. That is always a challenge with any type of scripting you're writing. Especially when you talk about doing the layers, because you get even more problems. Because something breaks. Is it this layer? Is it this layer? Is it this layer? Is it this layer? Or is it this layer? Or is it the actual app? But if for regression, if you have it written to do regression testing that's sort of been proven out, you can run the same test over and over again. If it breaks the next time and you haven't changed it, theoretically it should be isolated to the application. And when you put a new build version out for your stuff, you got to kind of do your own regression of your automation scripts. But if you have a proven process of running through it, you can reduce, I wouldn't say eliminate, a lot of that type of concern.
So kind of to this point, I'm having this internal debate right now is, does anybody write unit tests for their automated fixtures?
It's a requirement from our automation team. They can't check it out. That's not what I own, so I can't say that.
The framework itself or the actual test fixture?
The test, well, they're not using fitness for fixture type stuff, but every single our spec type test goes through. They have to write a unit test to make sure that that code is effective. And it's the script for when we get to the actual my team's level of use, where they're actually going in and customizing the Ruby scripts for their use. They're not necessarily writing unit tests for that, but if there's anything at the finder level where, finds the objects and things of that nature, anything below that has to have a unit test.
Why are you writing so many, I guess, fixtures for your automated tests? To me, it would be the automated test would be stepping through more of the real product in a stage database.
Maintainability is the main thing. It's a big investment just so that we can change things easily without having to rewrite our scripts. Because we use a TFS, Visual Studio, Microsoft Test Manager.
Okay.
It calls a generic test that tests this function. Whatever that does underneath, it doesn't care. But if something changes, like talk about login, the sign-in script changes to the deal, we have to make a change in one place theoretically, and that change applies to every script from that point forward.
Yeah, one of the challenges we had when we first started was, sample data. No one wants to have to sit there and create everything. Well, over time, as that sample data just got directly inserted into the database, it didn't go through the normalization process, and we actually had more trouble with the sample data. People saying stuff's broken. Well, it's the sample data almost every time.
That's it, but we have where different groups maintain different parts of the system, and they're doing their testing, so I can't complain that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing, but they're changing our underlying data structure, and so a lot of our initial automation scripts kept failing because the data kept changing underneath. So we actually had to write a script to go out, add valid data every day, make sure that we had enough inventory or whatever else we were testing was qualified to meet those tests. So that was another SQL/automation setup script that has to be run, and then that feeds into the data for the other tests we're bringing in the day. We're not doing it with each script because we want to hit the database each and every time to go through it.
And kind of in response to that, I was at Austin Code Camp, that was a weekend or two ago. Jeremy Miller and those guys were talking about what they were doing with Storyteller and Selenium and driving an application they're developing. And one of the points they made, like they have a greenfield application, so they break a lot of the rules for the problems we deal with. But his point, to the point of getting the system into the state about to be tested, as far as data and stuff, real interesting point. He said always use the front door. He's talking about a service layer. Use the same service layer that would be actually setting up the case. Call it directly, invoke it from your tests. I think in your case, you're talking about being on a PHP versus a Ruby stack. That makes that a little interesting. But use the same code to set up the system that you are using to set up your test state as well. And it's a simple, but you don't think about it. You think, I'll just insert the data to the database.
Well, that's one of the things I
making sure you funnel through the same set of code that would write it in the first place.
Do you find you have to have a service layer for everything? Because unfortunately, the code was, not written that way.
Like I said, greenfield.
Fortunately, ours is a little bit past greenfield now, but it was, we were able to design it, and I was able to go in and say, I need service layers for everything so that, I can just go in and insert.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a true service layer architecture. The core point is look at how that data would have gotten there in the first place from a manual user putting it in, and follow that same code path.
Although
sometimes that's not easy.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, can you just have the browser do, the user has to log into the admin area and create this, and create these domains or clients?
In their example, they actually left themselves hooks into the application to be able to, they had a set of REST services that they didn't deploy to production, but they deployed in their test environment that would let them directly invoke that same set of code. So they could just ping it against, just over an HTTP message, set up this data, this data, this data. And that's an example of designing your production application for testability. Right? He's building hooks in, intelligently not deploying those hooks to production, but designing the app itself has to be designed for testability, that's a kind of a hurdle to overcome sometimes.
We had some other things that we did before, Kirk, maybe the prior one, and using store procs for SQL Server, where we had test store procs I would do a SQL trace feed in for a known path. Now the risk you have with that is what if something changes in the application structure that you're not in your SQL thing? But if it was something that was a regression of the whole product over a period of time that hadn't changed, it allowed us to stage things quickly without a full service layer.
The whole point is to avoid the dual maintenance of I'm going to change functionality in my code, and then now I'm going to make the exact same change in my test,
right?
To mirror that. It's Ivory Tower, but if it can save your butt a lot. So
I think that's good.
We try to make our fixtures just as thin as they can be, so that we're just.
What's everybody doing? Testing of the database and loading of the database?
We do test against database.
Well, let's test against the database, but are you running like?
Oh, running tests of the functionality of the database. Heavy store procedures that are exercising that. Only a small handful, I know, for us.
We're not doing as much used to it. We used to use some basic unit test type work against SQL database and move back after each test case to make sure that we didn't run the data. It's kind of touchy though when you have dependent systems like replication and things of that nature that get in play. So it's the easiest thing to always set up.
Replication on your development databases?
QA databases, yeah.
We have it in our stage level.
Yeah, we do replication of QA environment.
I have just a question around the room. Out of all the people doing testing, like, how many tests do you have? How long do they take to run? Like, how is that scaled for you?
What test you're talking about? Well, for example, if we're doing more of a service-oriented architecture, we're greenfielding and use service-oriented architecture for a lot of our stuff. So right now we're using some UI scripts, and I mean, I had 1,700 tests, or take it back, about 300 tests, about 1,700 operations. Yeah, I tested in 7 minutes. That was full.
I'm talking more about like driving a driver.
Yeah, UI.
the one that doesn't scale.
Yes.
To that note, let me ask you a question. Can you multi-thread WebDriver and run different instances of it?
That's an interesting question because I was trying to do that last week.
Now, if you have the hardware,
cloud
and
instances,
you've got
that is what Selenium Grid is.
You've got a couple of
got a
hundred
spike
tests.
running.
You've got a couple of hundred tests. You've got the hardware. It all runs in there. You should be able to eliminate your dependency on the amount of time it takes to run your test suite.
So do you have a fully running grid?
No.
This is one of those in theory things.
I'm not talking about what I've seen in the demo, so I can't say I've used this and
Yeah.
know if it really works or not, but like Sauce Labs, they have a virtual cloud-based system where they host Selenium out there and it can run so many operations per second across different browser types.
I just
they
wonder,
claim.
how much you have to think ahead of time to make sure that it's built in a certain order, and then you can start to disperse and whatnot.
Yeah. So if anybody ever used a testing company like that to do that kind of stuff? So.
I know we've been looking at it. Sauce Labs.
I looked at it.
What did you see from what you looked at?
What did I see?
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't looked into it and seen if I can prove what they say they can do. I mean.
So you don't know if it's real?
I can't.
They actually do have, I've been on the site more for their Selenium training videos. They're actually pretty good, but I haven't used the service itself, so I can't comment on that.
I do know that we're at, we started with one giant test suite. We had to break that into 3 because just of the size it was getting into. Anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 tests in those suites. That's about right after.
Are you running, what kind of hardware are you running those tests? Are you running in
quad-core VMs with 4 gigs of RAM? But we're single-threaded.
They're single-threaded.
Right, so I mean, yeah. The problem is we haven't gotten any parallelization or grid stuff yet. We're looking at 3 hours, 2 hours per group. And we're reaching that breaking point where it's not feasible, not scaled. So we're starting to look at grid, but that's not, there's not a lot of documentation out there on it. The first one is just having a test framework that can be run multi-threaded and actually push out. You actually have to push tests to the grid in parallel. The grid doesn't just magically make your test parallel.
So
You have to write the code to get it.
right,
Are you guys doing any unit testing?
we are ballpark of 1,200 unit tests, 6 minutes, I think. Yeah. Unit tests, I mean, those can grow, I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. And I know we have a little bit of database dependency that we shouldn't, so it should be faster.
So do you,
Slightly artificial number, but that's some of
We
them,
do,
1,200 operations, but it's almost smaller.
right, our unit testing isn't pure unit testing. We started with brownfield application.
Legacy is kind of hard.
And
Brownfield application.
we are using, we started with MB unit and the row syntax to do a lot of blanket testing so we can set up test cases. And we switched to N unit, but it's the same thing, test case. A lot of those tests come from running a lot of permutations through the same code, but we can't, large pieces of our code base, we can't get down to what you truly call a unit level, right? Like we're hitting it at the highest level we can get our claws into, popping something in one side and seeing what pops out. We don't have the database dependencies, but we've had to mock it out with XML or different things. We can mock the web request, but we can only mock it starting at the very beginning and see what HTML pops out the other end. So it's not perfect, for sure.
What is greenfield and brownfield?
Greenfield is, you get that nice luxury of I get to start on a brand new application and do it the way I wanted to. Brownfield is a pile.
I got you.
Something you inherited.
I got you.
Use your imagination. So, yeah, it's sort of, one of the kind of frustrating things about all of the testing is you read and read and read and you're like, oh, just put all those hooks in your application and design for testability and that'll be wonderful. And, it's a little bit different story. It's a much harder exercise to take something that's not testable and make it testable. And no tool will help you do that. That is pure, I mean, that's where middle meets the road of just like good architecture, good refactoring skills, good development team. So.
Yeah, I also add too some of the conversations, fitness, the frameworks and stuff. There's a bunch of them out there.
Yeah.
Depending on what scripting languages you guys are comfortable with, or your team's comfortable with learning, or if you got a development team that can build it, of course they'll use a preferred language. But if you have actual testers that have scripting capability, or hope to have scripting capability, personal recommendation would be using something like Python or Ruby, just because they're fairly transferable and they have some English syntax to them. And one I'd say if you're doing a Python is like the robot framework for fitness. Same with Ruby is kind of the fitness type architecture, like Capybara or RSpec or Cucumber, things of that nature.
Does anybody use Cucumber? Because when I look at their site, it doesn't seem to ever get updated. Like their last, come to this conference in 2010.
I mean, they were really the pioneers of the whole thing and them thing. I think where the real usage is and is in all the frameworks that have split out since then. The hot one in .NET is usually SpecFlow. Ruby is RSpec. It's probably one of the top.
Story queue and
Yeah. There's, I don't know about Cucumber themselves, but they certainly spawned a very active community, still very active.
I think Cucumber, my only concern with Cucumber is you kind of really need the product owner team sitting there to kind of build out the acceptance criteria as you're building your test, because there's so many layers to write of the test. Versus our spec that we went with is a lot more linear that testers can write independently without this extra layers. But that's depending on your environment.
So do you have very separate, is developers sitting with the testers when you first get a story to try and break it down and write the test, or is it developers write it and then testers kind of come back and say, we need a IDE or an element to hook into here?
Well, like when it's greenfield, like new development type stuff, we're having them all the places that weren't very recognizable, we're having them add tags that we can't pick up through automation as they're going through it. We're having to be strategic with them. It's like, hey, you're touching this area, we need these tags or whatever else to put in the application to make it more automatable. Because a lot of stuff with regex or any other type of XPath type recognition you have to go through, it can be slow because it's got to scan the whole document for that particular pattern versus if you have a particular ID or
return it like that.
You can return it really quick. So that's where you see some of the pages that I've worked with in the past, and I could have tested this manually in 20 seconds versus what it's taken this thing to go through a 60-second scan of the page trying to find the right element and fill it in and do the same thing for the next element and so forth. So a lot of it comes down to just working with your development team on, as they're touching stuff, have them address it as you go forward. It's an evolutionary approach versus the big bang approach.
RSpec is what you're using to write the stories like the given when then? Is that
Yeah,
right?
basically it's just acceptance criteria type deal.
Is RSpec in a given when then format? Now I'm starting to remember it and I'm thinking it's not.
I haven't personally written it in a while. I'm trying to remember now. It's not given when then, but it's a similar format.
There is a
It
Ruby
should.
given when then, and I'm starting to think it's not RSpec.
Given when then, it's more like a Cucumber approach.
Yeah, I've actually used Cucumber. The one test I've written it, then it ran it. It does the regex, it pulls out the given when piece, and then you tell that, given I need to log in here, go launch a browser, log in here with these credentials.
Yeah.
So
it's
do
a very
you,
similar format.
are those written just like more from a user perspective, or do they go deeper than
Well,
that?
the only thing I qualify with RSpec is it's really designed around a unit testing framework.
Okay.
But we've extrapolated it out to having a DSL layer on top of it to make it more extensible and usable for the non-coders, or the non-heavy coders, I should say.
Yeah, I think I misspoke there. RSpec is actually down a level a little bit, like conceptually from the Cucumber, SpecFlow, Fitness. Those frameworks are all about non-technical English readable tests. Now that I'm remembering RSpec, it's actually there's a degree of programming happening at that level.
I don't want to totally derail this conversation, but while we're talking about tools, one of the things that we're kind of struggling with right now, see if anybody has any suggestions, is on the more of the business-facing test, how you show test case coverage to functionality, that kind of stuff.
Like mapping or traceability?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Is anybody doing anything like that?
Are you talking about at the browser automation level, or just any coverage in general?
Just in general.
At the unit level, what platform?
We're doing Java.
Java.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, our unit test, we have that.
You have coverage at that level.
Yeah, but we're trying to figure out, like, one of the things that we're being asked to be able to demonstrate is for a given story, what tests we have and how, what the coverage is, and having that history of it.
Yeah, we have it through, we're using TFS, Visual Studio 2010, and there you have the capability of creating generic tests, which can call any type of command-driven type tool, and that's what we're using to drive ours. But the fun with that is you have to write a generic test for every single test case. So we actually had a program, one of my automation guys write a program that, hey, take this Ruby script, decompile it, and put it into a generic test automatically, boom, and then I just have to link up to the test cases, and it manually still, but we have this link, and so we have traceability is, when this runs, it logs it against the database just like any other manual test is, and then we run a report and shows, okay, this is our automation coverage versus our manual coverage to whatever different user stories we're working with.
But it sounds like you're not really supporting or promoting using TFS by itself.
We use it for manual testing. We use it for manual testing and performance testing.
Couple minutes, we're going to rally back together, and so y'all need to nominate who's going to give you a report.
No. The only reason we haven't used like the coded UI of TFS is because it's a lot like QTP. It takes over your desktop, your whole system, so you have to have dedicated systems to run it against. Versus automation scripts, we can have running 4 or 5 browser instances in a virtual box on the same box without worrying about licenses or any type of desktop coverage utilities.
What does TFS stand for?
Team Foundation Server.
Yeah, it's Microsoft's branded source control and project management.
Their solution to everything.
Yes. They're trying to be, their MTM release is now trying to be the QTP, or not, well, the QTP Visual Studio 2010 replacement, as well as the Test Manager, was it from HP now.
Quality Center?
Quality Center, thank you. It's trying to be the replacement of both.
I really think, at least from what I've seen in the .NET environment in terms of spec flow, and I know there is a equivalent in Java, the given when then is usually, so you create these feature files, which is here's a given feature, here's scenario 1, scenario 2, each scenario is a given when then. The given when then are for a given story, here's your list of acceptance criteria for that story, right? You are proving out that story, and you can take that and say, look, not only are we on the same page of what acceptance criteria we have, I have a green passing test.
Right, but how do you tie that test back to?
So you could go through and you could annotate that with however you track your stories. That first step, the feature, is your story. You usually actually write in your actual story there. So if you're very story oriented, and different companies, you could link it straight to that. I've played around with actually linking. We use version 1, linking to our version 1 case in there.
Yeah. See, we're using Rally for user story and defect management, and then our automated tests are kind of just out there right now, and there's not with Rally, there's not really a good way to.
We're actually using Rally too right now.
The question I have for all this is that, this is for reporting, right? You just want to show your manager that every number of tests. This is what we've done. This is what you got for your money.
Right, but it's you're right. It's a reporting thing, but it's a requirement that we have. We're being asked to meet, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to do it.
EasyBeat does. It sounds like what you're describing. That there'll be .story files, which are the different scenarios. You can break it out however you want, and you can very easily run a report on that. I forget what it actually terms it, but the difference between the English scenarios versus those that have the actual automated code. The automated code is within those scenarios, and it will give you the numbers based on either way, whether it's automated or not.
Well, Cucumber actually gives you each story and how much passed and all that, but I don't think you can directly say this story covered this much easily.
And that's kind of.
I mean, the other thing I think you could do is some weird trace route with maybe for PHP you have Xdebug, and it'll tell you every line that it touches, but that would
what
take
test
years.
cases have been automated and what test cases haven't been automated. You have to have, you've got a story and you're trying to prove a story, or you're trying to prove a particular behavior in the application, but there's still test cases. I mean, you still have to validate, the payload just loads properly.
Oh,
there's
right.
no
I mean, we
errors
have that, but
there's validation.
It's the
business.
Yeah, it's that business need. It's really just a pain. But so y'all are using Rally for your.
Yeah, we just started using it, and I'm hating it because it doesn't interface with TFS too well.
So the person will kind of come up and disclose their mind to y'all about what was discussed in our particular little breakout session, and then y'all can ask questions. Anybody that was in the breakout session is eligible to answer the question, not just the poor person that we've hung out here to be the spokesperson. Okay, so we'll break the ice. We'll go first. Bob has graciously volunteered to be our spokesperson, so give him a hand.
Hi, my name is Bob. I work for CorePoint Health. I'm an Agile developer, and it's been about 90 minutes since I wrote some code. There you go. All right. So, easy crowd. Gary started out with what he thought was the warm-up, just trying to give a background of what we call user stories. Started with customer stories back in the XP days. They've evolved over the years, and then user stories can kind of evolve. They start the conversation to get the requirements, and then there was a little bit more discussion than perhaps he expected On requirements are tests. They're almost functionally equivalent, just change the word, change the sentence. We got a little bit hung up in what he thought was the introductory material, how the acceptance criteria manifest during the conversation, the story starts the conversation, the acceptance criteria continue it, don't want it to stop the conversation. And the product owner is responsible for the user story and the backlog items. And then finally, we got to the three formats of requirement phraseology that he suggested. Test that, fill in blank, given when then, fill in blank, blanks, and demonstrate blank. And he analogized them to different wrenches. Test that as a crescent wrench, right? It's fixed size. Demonstrate that. For some people, some stakeholder user types think more in, well, just show me something. Show me that blah. Or he analogized given, when, then to socket wrenches. Each one, if you can boil it down to given the context, for me the analogy was as a user, what kind of user, what are you doing? When, event, when I click this, when message arrives, when disk fills up, whatever, then testable response. An example given was, given a sold out show as a theater patron, when I try to reserve a ticket, tell me that there are no tickets available for this performance. All right, pretty easy. Another gentleman in the session said in his presentations, in his tool bag, he has 8 different formats for expressing the requirements. And scrumcrazy.com if you wish to see his list and his presentation. And somebody owes me a buck. So. Finally, as we were trying to wrap, we were kind of in a hurry to wrap up. I did mention we got a little bit sidetracked in the beginning. Then it was, how do you drive the product owner to a good user story, to good acceptance criteria, to good requirements? And the worst case scenario thrown out is, by the way, your product owner is an external client, so you're not even in the same company. I almost said not on the same team, but one would hope.
You get to talk to them.
You get to, yes, indeed.
Okay, because I was at just a contract where we were not allowed to talk to the customer.
Good luck with that.
Who would want to talk to him?
So anyways, we're wrapping up. One of the answers to encouraging the product owner and the product owner support team to develop the good stories and not spend too much time in an iteration planning meeting hammering out these details so we can get to the moment of estimation and commitment. Frequent backlog grooming. Working this iteration to groom the backlog so that we're ready to commit the final details for the next iteration. Okay, we didn't actually use these words, I made those up. There you go. And then create and enforce, yes, another suggestion was, as an organization, as a team, create and enforce, and of course that's when we were finishing, what the definition of ready for a story is. And going back to the theme at the beginning, or theme of just about anything about Scrum, the story, it drives the conversation. It certainly doesn't end it. Questions? Tomatoes?
Thank you, Bob. All right, so any questions for the Given When Then breakout team? All right, who's next?
Okay. So,
You want me to?
all right.
Are we doing like a
harpo
gotcha thing?
Together, I'm Ty.
I'm not Ty.
My Ty.
My name's Eric.
So I started by facilitating the meeting on what is now manual and automated testing, the relationship between the two. And then I'll let Eric start speaking.
All right, so I cannot take credit for any of this. I am just a vessel for which Alan's policy is flowing through. So I feel bad that I'm going to steal all his words. So for us at our company, we did not have a formal QA process up until about 2 months ago. And so our discussion revolved around our progression from starting with the manual testing and how it leads into automated testing. And for us, the idea revolved around the creation of the testing charters. The testing charters give us a way to provide vectors into an application. I want you to go test this piece of the application and report back what you find. And the findings from those testing charters, those manual tests, drive the areas of concern and where we should start creating our automated tests from. Because if I go up to Ty and say, hey Ty, I need you to create automated tests for this application, automate. Yep. Right? So what the manual testing charters do is it gives us a focus on, all right, where in the application are we finding the most areas of concern? Where should we focus most of our automated testing? Which of these steps can even be automated? I know in our discussion, a lot of examples were brought up of UIs that change frequently depending on certain scenarios. And from that, it's hard to write a UI-driven automated testing suite. So in situations like that, how do we approach it? And that's what we say, that's kind of the balance you have to strike between manual testing and automated testing.
So can we start out with automated testing?
Yes, there's no reason you can't start out from automated testing. I think if you have, I feel, and I'm not sure we talked about this in the group, but I really feel that, this is me personally, I feel that if you have enough, if the talent on the delivery team has enough knowledge of the working of the application, they have a pretty good understanding of at least the areas of concern where they should start creating automated tests for. And I say talent on the team, again, because I really don't like the pigeonholing of, you know what, QA guy, you're writing tests. You know, and developers, you're just developing, and DBAs, you're just touching the databases. I really think that people who have the most in-depth knowledge in an application are probably the best people to create the automated scripts. Now, I know there's tools called Cucumber? That allow you to create tests in a more plain text fashion. And these are things that even a product owner could create a test for using these tools, right? And we use the example of the best testers are probably people that have the most business knowledge, and at our company specifically, that's client services, it's our help desk. These people have the most talent with the application from a business standpoint. So who better to go in there and say, you know what, this is how the application should be exercised from the business standpoint. I want to exercise this charter, or you know what, we should create a test that does these steps because I, as a client services, get the most calls of customers doing X, Y, and Z all the time, and sometimes it doesn't work. So, what's next?
Is there situations where you can't do automated testing?
Another thing I was going to add on, if you're already doing a lot of manual testing, and we discussed this as well, how do you get to automated? And the answer pretty much was start somewhere.
Right.
Just pick a test or pick a story and automate it.
Situations where you can't?
Do automated testing. That was the situation where the user interface changes a lot, where if you're doing a constant churn, one of the questions that we brought up was, if you have a large automated regression testing script, who maintains that? Who is the one modifying your regression testing script with every sprint if you have deltas going into your code base? I know we have a hard time maintaining our just community wiki at the company, let alone our regression testing suite. You know, if I can't get someone to maintain what the current phone list is, who the heck's going to manage this thousands of lines of regression testing code? So for us, it's a situation where if you have a very complex library or a very ever-changing application, it becomes almost burdensome to maintain that automated testing suite.
But it's something you still have to do, right?
Definitely, and that's why I was saying it's not something where, the example that was given is that you try to keep your testing as lightweight as possible. And it was brought up in our group that in a situation where you have a large automated testing platform, if you're going to be writing a lot of tests, make them small, but make them valuable. Like, try to hit the most value laden parts of your application with your automated.
Best of breed test.
Pardon?
We call it best of breed test.
Best of breed test. I like that. In the back.
Extend on that real quick and kind of brief into the tools. It shows the importance once you get that large suite of being able to quickly and easily change that test suite.
Right.
Which means that test suite quality of that code has to be at or better of your production code.
And I mean,
it's got to be a really nice framework.
And you could say the same qualities for writing quality code go into writing a quality test, right? Like back in the old days, IBM used to pay by the KLOC, right? How many thousands lines of code did you write? And we're going to pay you for that much. I would not expect, if a developer or anyone on the team comes up to me and says, here's this thing I did, it does this really simple task, but it's, it's really cumbersome and huge. No sooner would I say that's good. If someone came to me and said, here's my testing framework, it's really cumbersome and huge, I'd be like, that's probably not the best way to do it either. We need to find something that's a little more distilled and focused for what we're going to be testing. Am I doing this right? We're good? All right.
A really awesome automated stuff, does it mean that we don't have to be as sweet in our manual testing?
No. And we say that because the example, like Alan talked about earlier, was the example of the minefield, is that an automated testing suite will not exercise the application the way that I, as an end user, will exercise the application, right? So Alan's example was, if I run an automated test 5 times in a row, if it passes the first time, it's probably going to pass the next 4 times, right? But if I give 2 people the same test vector, this person might come back and say, you know what? I didn't find anything in the application that looks like an area of concern. This person might come back and say, hey, I found all these areas of concern. What's up with this? And we say, okay, we'll log that information, and let's give the testing session maybe a 3rd person. They might come back and say, here are 3 different areas of concern that I saw that no one else saw because I'm exercising it differently than anyone else. So the example there is different permutations, right? I might click a button A, B, and C. Someone might click B, C, and A. Someone might click CBA. The way that the human brain works is different and more free-flowing than the way an automated test works. An automated test is a robot. It's the same reason that hopefully no one in this room is a robot, because you'd stand out like a sore thumb. So it's one of those things where we really emphasize the importance of the individual talent exercising the application, and that's what we say client services, help desk, people who have that black box, my QA term, black box knowledge of an application are probably the best ones to test it, because they don't know the inner workings, how the dials are spinning, how the rotors are turning, but they know from a business standpoint what the application should do. And that kind of value you just can't get from an automated test.
Well, wouldn't you just put those 3 different types of user scenarios into the automated test?
Yes, that was also brought up. QTP can easily automate those kind of permutations. But that is just an example of how I might see something upper right corner, and you know what? That's not related to my test vector, but I'm going to chase down that defect because that doesn't look right, even though it's not even in my vector. I'm going to spend time looking at that. It's something where my perception and my understanding, my cognitive understanding of what's happening on the screen is different than what an automated tool sees.
That's what I was just going to say, is that the thing that automation can't do is react to a changing situation. So when you're manually running a test and you just happen to see something and go, oh, this is interesting, let me explore that. If it's not written into the automated test, it's not going to be able to do that. It's like suddenly, well, wait, this box is 4 pixels off from what it was yesterday. Something weird's going on. Let me see what's happening. So it can only react to what you program it to react to. So yes, it can run the permutations, but somebody has to know to program it to run those permutations in the first place.
Right.
And automation can never answer questions about usability that the human person sitting in front of the computer is going to say, I'm looking at the screen, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do, because the screen doesn't make sense to me. An automated test will never answer that or understand that problem.
Right, so that's why we bring up the idea that when you're doing manual testing, and again, we had to play the wordsmith game, right? Because the talent doing the testing would say, hey, I found a defect, hey, I found this, and the product owner might say, no, that's not a defect, that's an enhancement. I can't go back to my boss and say, oh, we found all these defects in the system, right? So we're kind of figuring out wordsmithing. We say, all right, it's an area of concern. It's an area of concern. It just doesn't look right to me. This isn't functioning the way it is. And it falls ultimately up to the product owner to decide, yes, this is a defect that we need to address. This is the priority I'm going to give it. This is an enhancement. I agree. This is not the way it should be working. It's not a defect. That's definitely something we should add to the system. So it also, manual testing kind of brings in the whole UX standpoint. Is this even usable? Is this something that we should be concerned about?
All right, so we'll take questions.
What's your number 1 tip to maintain automated tests on an ever-changing application?
What is my number 1 tip for maintaining an automated test?
Test automation is software development. So somebody needs to be responsible for it. It needs to be tested itself, not as heavily as the main automation, but think of it as software development and have somebody designed to maintain. Sorry, good.
I mean, I think the simple answer to that question is abstraction. The more you can abstract your test code away from your application, the more robust it's going to be. And the more you can centralize functionality into library, or if they do make some changes to your application, you have one place to make that change in your library, and all of your tests then are still able to execute.
So creating those layers of abstraction is really the only way to effectively do that over the long haul.
A real easy first win on that one is the DSL layers, any of the given when then frameworks like SpecFlow and the Cucumber frameworks. We never got the huge, like, the project manager can write the benefit, or can write the test, but the benefit we got from it was it's naturally, it enhances code reuse and it's easier to maintain.
So I'll say for us, the product owner does write the test. They write it backwards. They write the result of the test as the acceptance criteria.
Yeah.
And for us, well-formed acceptance criteria drives our testing focus.
Holy grail.
Any other questions?
So is the automated testing maintenance the responsibility of each agile team as they touch different parts of the code?
I would say that it falls on the Scrum team that's responsible for maybe that silo of the application. Depends how your Scrum teams are set up, right? Some Scrum teams share common components of a single application. Some Scrum teams are responsible for a single application. I would say that a Scrum team, personally for me, I would say the Scrum team is responsible for the area of application that they are responsible for maintaining. However your company divides that out. If Ty agrees with me, I'm blown away. You know,
I'm curious as to if you discussed it all. You mentioned like the same principles apply to writing quality tests as to quality code.
Right.
I would think it'd be interesting to understand, okay, which test cases that we've written are actually uncovering errors, and what thought went into creating those test cases versus other test cases which really aren't finding much things. Essentially, it's kind of evaluating the test cases they've written.
I'll say it depends on your approach to automated testing. It's like we talk about there's the two approaches. You write your automated tests right away, or you let your results from your manual testing drive your automated testing, right? So if you let your manual testing drive your automated testing, any defect you find in your automated testing should be a reintroduced defect that already exists, right? So in that case, you're going back and just remediating a defect that was reintroduced in the system somehow. I think that 9 times out of 10, the only time you're going to see defects found through automated testing that are new defects are if you're writing the automated test before you do manual testing. Because if you do manual testing and you log an area of concern and your product owner says, yes, this is a defect, we should address it, and you do address that, then your manual testing process is working and your automated test should just verify that that defect doesn't get reopened.
Now, what about volume of utilization of the application? Manual testing is not canned, but you're going to have, that's one of the advantages of automated testing. You can expand your testing to stress the system.
Right. And I mean, that's the value-added benefit of automated testing. And I know we had the discussion towards the end of our group where the idea is how do you sell the product owner and the business off on the idea of if we spend the extra money creating these automated tests, we will save all this money over here, right? It goes to the idea, and I always harp on this with our testing, is buy-in. Buy-in, the developer, the development team, the talent doing the work has to buy in on the value of the testing they're doing, or they're just going to flake on it. They're like, I don't need to do this. Why should I have to write this? You have to have buy-in on the product owner saying, you know what, I as a product owner, I'm going to reprioritize my list because I know if I put these unit tests, automated tests, the time savers towards the end of my release, I'm going to save a lot more time down the line. I realize and I buy in the value of that. And the business has to say, yes, if we do this over the next 2 years, we're going to save a whole lot of money. And the idea that because it's the delivery team's responsibility for ensuring quality of the application, that's expensive talent. I mean, across the board, that is expensive talent. Like I don't know about you guys, but we have really talented people working for us. I'm sure everyone has really talented people working for you too. And that's money that you're spending doing something that you could automate. And that's the buy-in that you have to give the business side saying, I can't make the team work faster, but I can make them work more efficiently. Let me do that.
So the basis of your automation is with your product owner. That they're already setting the acceptance. You just have to enhance that to find any possibles that would have.
What do you think?
I don't know. Elaborate a little bit more, Wade.
No, you were saying the product owner is the person who actually sets your actual criteria. So So they should be working with your test people in order to develop a tool, is the bottom line. Other than doing the manual testing and enhancing that, they should also work with them. So that way you can actually enhance your tool.
Well, I mean, I think the product owner describes what the acceptance criteria is, fleshes out, this is what functioning software should look like. As far as how we go about testing that, I mean, I think you really have to look at what your team's skill set is and let that drive the decisions you make about how you're going to go about building that automation out. There does have to be a partnership with the product owners because they have to be able, if you decide you're going to use fitness or one of these other RSpec or one of these other tools where the acceptance criteria has to be defined in a very specific executable format, then yes, you have to work with your product owner to help them understand this is what we need in order to make this jump to the next level. Does that answer your question?
I'd add to that too is the fact that it is a business decision where they want to invest the money or take the risk. And that's the thing is, that again, regression migrate keeps building up as you add more and more features. So if you have a test bed that has to be tested manually and that keeps growing, and you can show that's growing, well, at some point in time, unless you're miraculously working people nights and weekends for a long-term basis, your percentage of coverage is going to slip. Matter of fact. So it's a matter of convincing the business that, hey, we're taking more and more risk as we move on. Yeah, we're focusing on these new features and such, but our regression library might be getting less and less coverage over time because we don't have the manual resources to invest in it. And so, is that a risk you're comfortable taking? Some businesses might accept that. So it might not be worth the automation effort if that's their decision. But if they want to reduce that risk and increase the coverage or at least maintain it somewhat, you're going to want to show it as a business decision that they should invest in that to get that coverage that they want. I always show exactly what we're not testing. This is what we're not testing with every single release, and it's growing. I'm even doing automation with it too. But it's like, okay, if you want me to have more automation coverage, then guess what? You're going to have to invest more money. So far, they decided not to. This is the next crash hits. Of course, who will they come to? But at least I got my little audit trail showing, hey, I've been showing you all this time that this is wrong. And you chose not to invest in it.
Right, and it goes to the same question about automated testing. You have to manage technical debt in your automated tests as well as your code base,
Yes.
right? So it's part of that idea of the whole SDLC also applies to your automated testing. They don't just exist out in the ether like, all right, we're going to bring them in when we need them, do what we have to do, and then send them back out in the pasture.
Yeah, because on our last round, we were prepared to deliver a release. We don't release with every sprint, but we were getting prepared to release, and so we set aside a sprint just for testing. And we took a different approach using session-based testing, exploratory testing, vectors through the software. We uncovered a lot of issues that have been in the software for a long time. But one of the things that came out in our discussion was, hey, we have unit tests that would have caught some of these things if we had been running them. And that discussion led to the fact that, well, we can't run we've turned off all of our unit tests because most of them are broken. And so we can't even compile if we don't comment out the unit tests.
Helen, I'm right here.
But that just demonstrates the point of, yes, you have to manage the technical debt on your testing just as much as you do on your software. You were in that discussion.
Well, I guess if you guys have more questions about that or our discussion, we can talk about that after everybody finishes talking. Somebody else want to talk about their other topics? Were there any other topics?
Just one more.
One more? Cool. Tools?
We talked about tools and we found out that the majority of our group are Selenium users. Most people like Selenium, that's their tool of choice, of course, here in our group. We also talked about some things we could do to make test automation frameworks more maintainable, separating out the test automation suite into layers, and as was spoken to earlier, creating different layers of abstraction. There were a few people that are trying to do some more of the RSpec or Cucumber type stuff, but driving tests through Selenium was mostly what we talked about in the architecture around creating that test suite.
Is that the Selenium IDE or the Selenium 2 API?
we talked about that.
So, I tend to, have issues with tools changing the behavior of how you would do things if things were done right. Do the tools that you utilize make you change the way that you either do the development or you do the testing to, overcome the shortcomings of the tools? Selenium, for instance?
I would say sometimes yes, but one of the cool things about using tools is that there's always going to be some tests that you can do that are give me's. So regardless of whether you're a manual tester or an automated tester, you can catch things like server errors and JavaScript errors and behaviors that present themselves through the browser to the user. So it doesn't. I wouldn't say it really affects the way you would test something, whether you're automated or manual. It just affects how efficient or how quickly you can get that done. Because every test you automate, first of all, you have to test manually. So.
Yep. So if I'm trying to convince my guys to go and get one of these tools, it's going to cost me a lot of money.
There's a lot of open source tools. For example, Selenium is free, and we all like free things, so it's an open source tool.
Is it the best tool, or is it just the tool of choice because it's free?
I think it is one of the best tools right now as far as the level of support it gives you for browsers, the level of functionality that comes with it, how robust the tool is, how easy it is to integrate into different IDEs and different environments, and how easy it is to apply to various types of projects.
Can you report out of it?
Can you what?
Report out of it?
Well, you can report out of basically anything as long as you have the ability to develop your tests in a way that they're reporting back.
Okay.
So.
It inherently does not include any kind of reporting feature. It's whatever you can build on top of it, or whatever, end unit can kick out reports, that kind of stuff. But there's nothing inherently reporting built into Selenium.
And Selenium was built to be just a browser testing, testing system, I should say. So it's not going to do anything but that for the most part. But there's plenty of frameworks that Jed and Mark talked about that does have supporting reporting functions type that Selenium interfaces with.
I heard a how do you choose question.
How do you choose the best tool for your company and your application without spending a lot of time researching it?
I would say you always have to spend a lot of time
Researching
it.
Not actually wasting a lot of your efforts with your subject matter experts.
Because basically over the last few years, there's been an explosion of tools on the test automation market. There's so many different tools out there. My personal recommendation is to look at the technology that your company is using, look at how easy the tool is to use, and look at how powerful the tool is. I mean, you're going to have to do some type of research to come to a tool that's going to solve your problem, and no tool was created equal. So it depends on the problem you're
One
trying to
other
solve.
comment on that. Be sure to choose a tool that everybody else is using, because chances are you're gonna have to ask for help at some point. If you're using a tool that only 1 in 100 people are using, you're out of luck. Yep.
Now, can I ask if is that an artifact of open source, or is that something where you would find that with a commercial piece of software as well?
You're gonna pay one way or the other. You're gonna either pay in your own team's ramp up, development time, support, rapid support,
Right.
even for responses, things of that nature. So you are going to pay one way or the other, whatever methodology you choose or tool you choose.
And
Just of when and how.
We use an open source project management tool nobody else uses. We are lost whenever we run into a problem, so.
And that's like Selenium is one of the biggest supported automation communities out there.
And that, when you're looking at, when we're researching tools, we use all of the source stuff we're trying to. And that's what I look at is, what's the community support base, If I pull up a tool and their website or wiki or whatever hasn't been updated in a year, I don't wanna I'm done researching that tool.
I mean, I'll boomerang it back to you this way. I mean, how many times have you successfully called up Microsoft support and gotten exactly the answer you need versus going to, say, Stack Overflow and something, right? In my experience, community support's going to get you there quicker. It may not always be the answer, but for an 80-20 scenario.
Yeah. I know I've worked on things where we were paying for a commercial product, and we wound up getting more help out of the community, the local Dallas community, out of their $100,000 a year.
I think very simply to answer your question, ask the people who are going to have to use it. These test frameworks can be very tied to what platform you're on, that kind of thing. And at the end of the day, it's the developers themselves, it's an automated test suite that are going to be banging their head against it. So, yeah, they're going to know best. At the end of the day, it's testing. You're still going to get the testing, so let them go with something they're comfortable with.
To extend off of the support community, if you're picking a tool that has a stack that matches what your development team is using, then you have a built-in support system.
Yeah, with that built-in fallback on that.
If you've got a .NET or Java team or Python, you go with Selenium. If they're doing Ruby or Perl, you go with Water.
Got C#, guys. C#.
Okay, how about for us older guys who are still stuck in the assembly and COBOL world? Is there a framework out there for us?
Just debug it off the punch cards.
We've gone green, don't worry about that. But seriously. Is there anything out there, is there anything out there for us older guys?
What are you testing? Is it web-based or what type of?
Mainframe software.
I've heard some
So you
people
have to
have had some
install.
success with like QTP on green screens. I'm not going to guarantee anything because
We use QTP against green screens at my last job, and it's actually pretty effective. Now, it's an expensive tool, but we were able to drive the green screens very, very quickly, pretty quick ramp up in terms of actually developing the test, and they ran super, super fast. So that would be definitely something to explore. Again, it's an expensive tool, but I didn't find any other options, really good options for green screen testing.
Thank you.
I would like to add that with your interest with your tool, make sure the tool is going to, in the future, actually continue down your development path. In case my company had bought in readily into Watton, and we've changed directions, and Watton basically stopped support of Firefox and Safari, and they never supported Chrome. So unless you're using Firefox 2.3, you can still use it. So they're assuming you're an IE only shop. So I've used Capybara, which is good. It utilizes Selenium driver as well as Chrome driver and the intrinsic web driver. And I've used Selenium, but for our particular scenario, what we ended up having to do is, like the RDS said, was none of those worked for us. We had to abstract back one layer to the view models and actually utilize the view models for automated testing, and then continue on with aesthetics with manual testing. So
I think what the point he's trying to get is, I remember when WhatN first came out and it looked really good and I was psyched about it, and then 2 or 3 years down the later, guess what? It's a dead open source project.
and you don't want to go to your management and say, look, I have to redo everything I did for the last 3 years. It's working.
That's unfortunately the risk in open source, though. You can't predict how well an open source project is going to succeed and continue. And that's why looking at the community and seeing how long it's been active, how well it's supported, is a really important criteria when you're dealing with open source.
And that's the root of my question of Cucumber being the most preferred software platform, because it's free or it's the best, right? Because imagine if I built my software platform around MySpace.
We're the one that I think the one that's most popular right now for automated GUI testing is Selenium. So that's what we were determining. So I mean, there's still a lot of other stuff out there. Tim's used they're using some different frameworks. There's a few people that are using Fitness for their automated testing, but if you have to, go with how many people know how to use this tool, how long has it been around, and how long do I think it's gonna be around? Right now, I think Selenium is the winner from our group.
Can't you also purchase support for Selenium, or through the creator of Selenium has his own company or something, right?
I've never actually had to purchase support for it. So
Well, I'm not saying you should. I'm not saying you should have to. I think one of the creators of Selenium started his own company and he provides support.
I think so, Sauce Labs.
Yeah, Sauce
there
Labs,
you
we're
go.
talking about.
Yeah, so, and that's another, it's good as a backup plan anyway. I agree with you, though, you probably should have to pay for it.
There's a lot of other companies out there that are using Selenium to actually, as the back end for their testing applications. So hopefully it'll be around for a while and they'll have some support.
Yeah, back to the cucumber, I do case in point that supporting cucumber and JavaScript is absolutely horrible. We had a lot of velocity up front. The port to Ruby is fine. It's integrating with Capybara and all those different things. The JavaScript implementation, they got it working just enough so that they can call it working, but it doesn't implement scenario outlines and examples and specification by example or anything. It's just scenarios that create specialized mappings to make the variables and the declaratives work. They, instead of modeling spec flow like they should have, they created their own world context and decided that they're smarter than the JavaScript community. And basically everyone ditched it. Now there's one guy supporting it. There's no momentum anymore. We implemented it, saw that it was a cool idea, and they kind of fizzled out, and we purged it from the uprooted from the tree.
And that's what you have to be careful with.
Yeah.
What was that tool that apparently did dynamic screens through the DOM? It was mentioned earlier.
Watton is one of the best ones we found, but it's limited to Internet Explorer. So it's
Watton or Watton?
Watton is water with an N.
Water is Ruby-based.
Water. It's extremely fast. I like the interface and the API much better than Selenium. It's easier to use, but it only works with IE, I think, 8 bugs. So you're really limited if you don't want to develop testing. So the fallback is always Selenium. It's a big point of block. So
The good news is that Microsoft decided that they only want to support IE in their testing frameworks too. So you're stuck in the same boat with them. You only get IE, you only get support for IE in Visual Studio. So
we went a different route. We actually pushed Chrome driver on all the other browsers.
that's, you can use, a lot of people do, they'll use, and I've done that before, you can use a combination of different libraries to achieve your goal of driving all your browsers.
What about mobile platforms?
What about them? I can see there's some interest on that.
No, I'm doing all that search right now, and I have, outside of some unit testing level stuff, so if you can get in tight with the developers who are writing your mobile code and talk them into building some unit tests, that's probably your best option right now for automating.
Have you tried PhoneMonkey?
I have not heard of that one.
Okay, right.
Somebody made that up.
No?
We're running with a robotic monkey or phone
Yeah,
monkey.
we've tried Robotium some. We've also tried, there's a open source extension for Selenium called Native Driver that unfortunately looks like it might have been abandoned, but if it's not abandoned, it alleges that it runs versus iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. So we're kind of looking at that right now, but there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of community around that, like we were just saying, so it's kind of hard to get that look at. But
Right now, you're seeing more requirement-based solutions addressing that are very expensive.
I heard a presentation by Adobe on Adobe Shadow recently, and they were mirroring one application on about 8 different platforms, and it might be worth looking at. I'm not for automated, but for looking at different platforms. They could get something on an iPad and get something on an Android, and they could drive it through one UI, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, there's some stuff out there that's starting to do that. So. Of course, in 3 years, it'll probably be done anyway, so.
You're not cynical.
That's it for us.
All right. Well, that was fun. So it's about 20 till, and so we'll get out here a little bit early. There's probably some extra pizza. Please grab it. And for those of you who this is your first time, was that good grammar? For those of you if this is your first time, this is a little bit unusual for our format. I like this kind of format, but we're getting really big. It wasn't long ago we were 30 people, let's say, so per. I mean, if you go out to our Meetup site, is it over 1,000 yet?
I think so.
Yeah, so we're a whopper now. We're going. I'm talking to improving to see if we can actually get us some more space, because it's a really an amazing turnout, and so I want to applaud you guys. Thank you. We're one of the biggest Scrum users group in the entire complex, and so I think that's kind of cool. But as such, Lance is a master at getting, and Allison, between the two of them, they're just masters at getting the big names, getting the famous people that's in, and I love that. But I don't want this to turn into anything other than a users group, and a great users group. So you guys were just talking about how powerful the community is around these tools. This is the best community for Scrum in the DFW area. So if you don't know the people that are around you, you should. Because chances are, if you've got a question about the application of Scrum, the answer is sitting in somebody's head in this room. Okay? So I would have you become part of that community and kind of leverage each other. Because, I mean, there's a lot of wisdom in this crowd. But these kinds of sessions, I'm going to fight to keep them like this. I like the kind of hippie organic sessions, and between Lance, keeping everything kind of tight and buttoned up and getting the cool guys and gals here, I think that's great, but I still like these kinds of things too. This particular session was his fault, and so if you go out to our Meetup site, we've got the little area where you can say, hey, I'd like to kind of see a session like this, and y'all as a group vote, and we just look at that and do something like this. Okay, so take advantage of that. Let's get your ideas. Be prepared to drive stuff. Okay, I mean, it's not scary. See, you can do it. Look at what y'all all did. So with that, are there any other questions?
Do you need help cleaning up?
A little bit. If you're just in the area that you were at, if you wouldn't mind just grabbing what you ate from and dump it, that's cool. The rest of the stuff we'll take care of. So we're good. All righty. Well, thank y'all. Oh, sorry.
Since there was so much discussion, it looked like people wanted to keep talking about stuff that's interesting to you. There's a forum out there, and since all of you guys, or most of you guys, are probably part of the Meetup site anyway, go use it and post a topic, and maybe you'll get some answers on stuff that you like.
All righty. Drive safe, y'all. We'll see you next month.